Christ himself has promised. The world loves darkness, their idols rent asunder. They rage and hate his word. Blessed are the persecuted, for theirs is Christ's kingdom. Fear not the fiery trial, as foreign unto you. Welcome to the Legend of the Martyr, where our heroes we look up to and seek to imitate aren't celebrities, athletes, or politicians, but our brothers and sisters in Christ, who have run the race, fought the good fight, and bore witness of Christ to their neighbors, no matter the cost, standing firm and enduring all things, that they may receive the crown of life. Welcome back to the Legend of the Martyr. And today we have a guest with us. Her name is Makia Adler. I'll pass it over for her to introduce herself in just a moment. But as a reminder of the show, we have been talking about martyrdom with the idea that it is the Greek word for witness or testimony. And so Jesus actually calls each of us to be his martyr, to bear witness of him to our neighbors, wherever we may be, wherever we serve. And sometimes that resulted in persecution and death, which is why the word martyr in English came to be what it is. But we're all called to it. And so you are a missionary, wherever you are, wherever you're listening in, God has sent you to be his witness, his disciple, his martyr in that place. So today we have with us someone who is out in the mission field, as we may sometimes call it. And so Makia, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here.
Can you tell us anything about yourself?
Absolutely. So I am one of the LCMS's newer missionaries. I just started last year, but I'm originally from a small town in the northeastern corner of Colorado. My parents are farmers out there, and I went to college for psychology, so I have a bachelor's in psychology, and when I graduated college, I decided to become a missionary. So now I serve as the volunteer coordinator for the LCMS in Latin America and the Caribbean. Specifically, I will be hosting teams in Belize. So my job is to work with all of the volunteers and the short-term teams and everybody who comes down to support our missionaries or learn about what the mission is doing.
Okay. So born and raised LCMS then?
Yep.
Very good. And so you mentioned at the end of college deciding to become a missionary. Can you tell us anything about that choice, that calling to go?
Absolutely. I was born and raised LCMS, and so when I was in middle school and high school, I had the opportunity to go on some mission trips, some short-term mission trips with my congregation, because my dad was part of the mission team and he was going, and so they were like, yeah, you can absolutely tag along. And I did that through a couple different LCMS, like the RSOs and a couple different entities that were Lutheran, and it was really awesome. I loved it. I knew when I was in high school that I definitely had a heart for mission. But I had yet to go on one with the LCMS actual Office of International Mission and go as an LCMS missionary. And so I got to do that my senior year of high school, right before I went off to college, and that was a totally different experience. That was something that kind of made me realize that maybe being a missionary, and not just a short-term missionary, not just helping out in that aspect, but maybe a career missionary and doing that more full-time, it would be an option and would be something that I could do. And then in college, I met and kept in contact with one of the other missionaries who's currently on the field here in the Dominican Republic. Her name is Erin McKenzie, and she is the volunteer coordinator who works with a whole bunch of different countries down here in Latin America, Panama, Peru, Belize, and anywhere else that they have short-term teams. And I kind of got to stay in contact with her during college, and the time came where there was an open position towards the end of my senior year, and she was like, hey, I think you would you would fill this role really well. And I just kind of decided that's what I was going to do.
Very good. Is there, I'm not going to say the word term limit, but is there a time period for what you're planning, or is it just open-ended?
It's pretty much just open-ended. It's usually, they say, 5 years is a good starting goal to say, hey, I'm going to commit to the field for 5 years. But of course, they love to have us stay as long as we are called to be here. And obviously if things, something changes and things don't work out for us to stay. But the goal is 5 years.
Okay, very good. So you mentioned you will be going to Belize. Mm-hmm. I guess maybe helpful for the listeners, where is Belize?
So Belize is a really small country. It's about the size of Massachusetts, and it is right south of Mexico, next to Guatemala. So it's in the heart of the Caribbean. Beautiful, beautiful area.
All right. And you are currently where?
Currently, I'm in the Dominican Republic. This is where our regional office is for Latin America and the Caribbean. So all of our new missionaries who are going out to that region start here for a few months to learn about the culture and learn Spanish and how the mission works and build relationships with the people that we work with here before they send us to our countries. God willing, depending on when the team in that country is also prepared to have us there and to support us that way.
Okay, so the LCMS already has a team in Belize on the ground?
Yes, there are 4 other missionary pastors and their families there. Pastor Jason Groth and his family, Pastor Micah Wildauer, Pastor Herb Birch, and then Pastor Benjamin Flores.
Okay, so have you gotten to interact with them some over the last few months then?
I have. I'm really excited to be able to go there and work with them. They're an awesome, awesome team down there. They're doing some really cool things.
Very good. When do you get to go? Do you know?
I do not have a date yet.
Okay.
We're having a lot of transition for new missionaries on the field and some missionaries who are leaving the field over this summer. And so kind of waiting for things to maybe calm down a little bit and have a solid support structure before they go shifting too many people around more.
Okay. Well, I certainly want to touch on or get to and talk more about Belize, but since you're not there yet and you are in the Dominican, what has life been like in the DR for you over the last couple of months?
It's definitely different than the United States, as one might think. I really love it here. The culture is really awesome. Latino culture, especially in the Dominican Republic, is very, very big on hospitality. And, if they have visitors, welcoming them into their homes and teaching them about the culture. And they make us feel very at home here and very welcomed and invited, which is really awesome. Obviously, I love the weather. It's warm. I have not seen a single flake of snow this winter, which is amazing. And then also
back here, this weekend, the northern states got hammered. I think my in-laws live up in Wisconsin. They got 4 feet of snow on Sunday.
Holy cow.
So, yeah, no snowflakes for you.
One of the missionary families, their family lives in Michigan, and they sent a picture this morning, and the snow was like almost covering their cars. And I was like, I don't miss that yet.
We only got brushed by it. We didn't even get a dusting on the ground, but it was snowing furiously and sideways for a couple hours Sunday afternoon here. So, but being from Colorado, being a farming family, you were probably connected more to a small town than a larger city.
Yep.
But even still, American culture is a lot different than what you were just describing. The whole hospitality picture hasn't really been America's picture for, I don't know, at least probably the last 2 generations now. So a lot of the listeners, people really in our generational time, this is unfamiliar territory for them to hear such things. You said it's enjoyable. Are there things about hospitality that you're receiving that not only surprising, but maybe negatively surprising for you?
Yeah, so it's definitely not, it's a pretty foreign concept the way that they do it here rather than how we see it in the United States, which makes the mission work that we do here different than other parts of the world, and even in our own backyards. So visits are a huge deal, going into people's homes and being part of the community and literally just going and being like, hey, can I come over and like share devotion with you? Or, walking through the street and you get invited into their house, and which is really awesome. I enjoy it. That's probably one of my favorite things that I get to be a part of here. However, coffee is a big thing in the Dominican Republic as well. And so it will be like 7 or 8 p.m. and you're doing a visit in somebody's house and they're like, do you want some coffee? And you gotta say yes, but then it's like, coffee in the nighttime. Also, island time is a real concept, and they're not really worried about, you don't have to go to that meeting later. You really don't need to worry about, how long you're there. And so it's really awesome to be able to spend time with people. Sometimes that time just isn't what you think it might be.
And so people who have more of like the A-type personality where everything has to be fixed on that schedule would certainly struggle with something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure, fair enough. How, as you've been learning about it, are there differences, will there be differences majorly between the culture of the Dominican versus Belize?
Yes. So the Dominican was largely populated when the Europeans came over by Spaniards. And so they have a lot of the Spanish culture, whereas Belize, they had Spaniards, so they have like that same concept of hospitality and things like that. But they also had a lot of English people from like the UK and from Britain that came over. And so they have a lot of similarities to us in other aspects. Their official language is English and things like that are very different from here.
So you might be picking up some Spanish, but you might not necessarily need it for where you're going.
Yeah. We have churches in Belize that do services in English, and that the services they provide are in English, and a lot of people speak English. We do also have some churches that do exclusively Spanish, just because that's the population that's there, is people who are more comfortable speaking Spanish. So it'll be useful, but I'll definitely still be using a lot of English.
Okay. Is it closer to American English or British English?
British English, but they also have Belizean Creole, which is not French-based. It is English-based, and it sounds very similar to English as well. So it's kind of their adaptation of English.
Okay. So I think, if I remember right, isn't the Dominican Republic loosely a Catholic country?
Yeah, so I think the last time I saw the numbers, the Dominican Republic is like 80% of people who identify as Catholic. But it's mostly cultural Catholicism. If you ask people, they know who Jesus is, and they can identify a picture of him. But if you ask them like the last time they went to church or something like that, it was probably the last time they were baptized, or if they had a family member who was baptized. So it's largely more of just like a cultural institution than it is like, a faith, a growing faith, a living faith that they believe in something. There is a billboard here, or there was, I'm not sure if it's still up, but it was kind of infamous, and it was a picture of Jesus, and he was saying, something about like wearing your seatbelt or driving safe or like don't have road rage or something like that. And you can ask people, and everybody can point at the billboard and be like, oh, that's Jesus. And so you're like, oh, great. We all know who Jesus is, and that's wonderful. That's a great starting point. But if you ask him, anything else, he is just kind of known as, well, he's Catholic and he's, wants you to drive safe. And that is largely what the people know.
You just put the image of like those American posters of Uncle Sam pointing his finger and he wants you. Like I'm seeing Jesus in that way now, pointing at me and saying, don't have road rage.
Well, whatever works, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a different picture of Jesus than probably we normally would have otherwise. Yeah, I know we've been as a congregation here at St. Matthew over the years recently been building a relationship with our Lutheran seminary down in the Dominican, and we've had a couple of guests from there come to our church, and it's been interesting hearing from them and learning about their interactions with the people and how they would go and offer even to baptize a child in a family, and the family was concerned because they thought that that meant that they were asking them for money. And so it was the opportunity to bring the gospel and to bring the gospel to families freely without it being something where you have to buy your way in. So that was just interesting to learn. One of the differences I remember, probably Pastor Fritchie. I don't know if you ever met Pastor Joel Fritchie before.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that's the DR.
That's something we talk about a lot on visits as well, because
okay.
you know you want to baptize your kids, and we want people to come be baptized, and then that's an opportunity for us to say, hey, you know, you wouldn't just take care of a child all this time and then leave it to die. You know, you want to baptize and then bring them to church to continue growing in their faith. So that's a really awesome outreach opportunity that a lot of our SEM students and the pastors who work here as well get to do that and be part of that.
And the seminary students, they're not just going to stay in the DR, right?
Nope. So we send them out. Well, they come from all different countries, and then a lot of times they go back to wherever they came from. Right now we have students from Chile, Guatemala, Honduras, Cuba, Venezuela, Bolivia, so all over South America, Latin America.
Are there any from Spain?
Right now in this seminary, no. I don't believe so.
I was thinking there might have been one before, but yeah, coming from all over. So for the listener, I know a little bit more about the DR. I know nothing about Belize, so I am going to get there. I want to talk to Makia about that too, but it's interesting just to hear some more and let you all hear in on what the Lord's doing in multiple different countries in the world in this episode. So the work in the Dominican has been a fruitful endeavor. I mean, the pastoral numbers that I hear usually maybe around, like, I want to say it's around the teens, but the number of deaconesses that are coming out of that seminary, ladies who are trained to serve in so many different ways, it's much higher, right?
Yeah, so right now we have 12 residential pastoral students, and I believe this year the cohort for deaconesses is maybe like 99 or 100 and somewhere in there. So yeah, we're having really awesome deaconess formation as well.
And thanks be to God. So you've got, on the one hand, this group of 12 men who will be going out to all these different countries, either returning to a church maybe that sent them, or going into a community where they're familiar with the culture and the people and seeking to plant a church and to build that relationship there. But we also have 99 or maybe more of these women who will be doing many works, whether it's mercy or service or all these ways of sharing Christ with their neighbor as well. This is Jesus talking about sending out laborers into the harvest field, so we rejoice. Anything else you want to share about the Dominican before we try and shift gears a little bit more?
Sure. One thing to keep in mind when we're talking about the Dominican versus Belize, and other mission fields as well, is that we've been in the Dominican Republic for 20 years. And so we've been in Belize for, I believe, about 7. And so you can definitely see, the difference in ministry. And Belize is growing really fast, and we've got a lot of really awesome stuff going on there. But you'll see that, like, the Dominican Republic, and as far as, like, its mission work and where it's at with the church is, further advanced. And it's something that we get to look forward to in Belize and saying, hey, look how we've grown in just 20 years, and we're only in year 7. Like, let's keep going. Let's see where this goes.
Excellent. And for you listening at home, that's a doable time frame, right? We think about a church. Makia, when you were growing up, do you remember how old was the church that you grew up at?
It had been there for probably 70 years.
That's about a lifetime when you think of the average the average human lifespan, right? And so here we're talking about 7 years or 20 years. These are new projects, and yet bearing fruit already. So thanks be to God for that too. Okay, 7 years. Who started the mission to Belize? Do you know?
So our very first missionary in Belize was Pastor Dwayne Meisner. And I believe at the time he came out of Texas, but now he serves in Colorado, actually.
I know the name. I don't know if I could say I've met him, but I've had conversations online with him before. So Very good. Okay. There's Meisners and Meisners in the LCMS. It's hard to keep them straight sometimes. But all right. Let's see. 7 years ago. Oh, I was going to ask of the same question about the Belize that I did with the DR. Is Belize also primarily a cultural Catholic location, or is it different?
Belize is different. Belize has a really, really interesting history of like colonization and just sort of how it worked out. It's the only Central and South American country where its official language is English, and it's one of the only ones that has like much British influence. And then in addition to that, because of the British, a bunch of Mennonites came over, and so there are pockets of German-speaking Mennonite communities who are still like German-speaking communities. And so it's definitely not nearly as much Catholic as the Dominican. But there are some influences, as well as, you know, the Mayan people are there. There's Garifunas, people who are indigenous from other islands that came over and fled them, as well as, you know, slaves who were brought over from Africa have mixed into that culture. And so we see a lot of syncretism there between Christian religions and local religions, and just kind of a lot of... It's definitely a melting pot. It's got a lot of different stuff going on.
Okay, so there's no major, necessarily official religion like some countries have?
I do not believe so.
Okay.
No.
So you will find, and I don't think this is much different than what you'd have in America, you will find people who recognize Jesus, but it will be a road rage Jesus maybe, not the picture of Jesus from the scriptures, but just what they have built up over time.
Right. And there has been a lot of different churches who have done a lot of work there, Protestant churches. But, you know, for whatever reason, maybe their missions didn't work out, or it was a short-term thing. So a lot of people, like you said, know Jesus or know of Jesus, but they don't have a church to attend. They don't get to regularly receive word and sacraments, or continue to grow in their faith in any way, shape, or form.
So when you make this transition in the months to come, what will you miss about the DR?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I think probably the most is the people. Because our regional office is here, we have so many missionaries and so many connections here. Not only with missionaries, I should say. We also have, I've been here for 5 months now, so I've built connections with the local people and the people in the congregations here, and our teachers that work at the school, and our Spanish teachers that teach the missionaries, and as well as the other missionary families who live here. I'm probably just going to miss the people.
That's a fitting response. We can think of how many times the Apostle Paul, as he's writing, talks about his love for the people that he knew. He's missing them. He prays every day for them. Those kinds of statements are pretty common in his epistles. So I can think of that as a pastor, too, having my first call was up in Minnesota, and then now being in Missouri. And that was the hard part, was leaving the people that I had spent those first few years of ministry getting to know and serving, and going to a different location. So So for the listener at home, I sent Makia a list of, I don't know, 9 or so questions, and I haven't asked her hardly any of those. I'm asking her random things off the top of my head. So she's doing well answering. Thank you for that. But so the flip to that is, if that's what you're missing most potentially of leaving, what are you looking forward to most in landing?
Honestly, the same answer. I'm really looking forward to working with the team in Belize, and continuing getting to know the people there, and the people who we get to work with and we get to serve in the congregations. Also, Belize is way more rural of a mission field. We have a camp there that we host short-term teams out of, and we kind of run a lot of church things out of, and the missionaries, some of us live on it, or will live on it. And so it's a not completely different mission field, but just sort of the way mission works is different, which is really cool, which I'm really looking forward to getting to. I've seen what's done here, and I love it. It's awesome. It's really cool. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how it works in other places as well.
Yeah, the Lord's word is working in the Dominican and blessing the people there, and in the same way, we continue to pray for it to be blessed in what it does also in Belize. So you mentioned earlier, as you introduced yourself, that you are going to be serving there as a volunteer coordinator. Can you unpack that? What's that mean?
Yeah, so the short answer is that means I get to work with the short-term teams and the groups and volunteers who come down to serve with our missionaries. The longer answer is that I do a lot of the prep work before teams come down. So, whether it's our missionaries saying, hey, we could really use some help with this, and bringing a need to us, or a group coming to us and saying, hey, we would love to go down and help with something. And then, finding a project that we may need help with, or doing an education project or something that fits the skills of that group and also the needs of the local missionaries and pastors. And so that's kind of where I get involved in the process. And then, working with them to build a schedule and, kind of flesh out the project, make sure that when they come to the field, they have some expectations, they kind of know what's going on, they have something, prepared so that they can complete their project, and then, once they're on the field, I take care of them, and then when they leave the field, connecting with them and saying, hey, we'd love to have you come serve again, or we'd love to have you serve as a missionary, or connecting them with ways to stay connected to the work that they've contributed to, and keep keep up with what's going on the field, and stay connected in that way.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, our church having been working on a partnership with the DR, there's probably some churches already connected, but your role in part will be helping specific congregations make a partnership there for ongoing opportunities. Do you expect that your work will primarily be with basically LCMS American Christians, or will people be coming from elsewhere that you'll also be working with?
Primarily, it's LCMS American Christians. Often we get college groups from both the Concordias and other school groups that are sometimes not LCMS, but they are usually led by an LCMS college ministry or something like that. But it's a really awesome opportunity for us to also say, hey, you can be part of this and you can participate in this, and exactly forming partnerships and things like that are great for, not only the team in Belize or the Dominican Republic or whoever you're working with, but also, there's a lot of things that we can learn from each other as Lutherans and as Christians, and doing things in different contexts.
Okay. And you had mentioned that you didn't use the word this time, but it sounds like the hospitality you've been enjoying experiencing in the DR is going to be part of your job in Belize.
Absolutely. I get to be the adult chaperone for the teams on the ground. I get to be, do all the hospitality stuff and host them while they're there, and get to work on that side of things too, which I'm really excited about.
8 p.m. coffee?
It's a cultural thing, so I think I have to include it.
Every culture does it. We all have our quirks. So be interesting when you get there to maybe hear again someday from you what quirks you found there compared to where you are now. But all right, well, actually returning to some of the questions I gave you beforehand, the idea of challenges that would face a Christian seeking to share Jesus, and you can answer this on both fronts, for the Dominican Republic, but also for Belize. What kind of challenges or limitations do Christians face as they seek to share Christ with their neighbors in those places?
Yeah, so in the Dominican, it's religion and your beliefs people are very open about it, and they love to talk about it. And so the challenge there comes with sharing it in a way that it is the true gospel, and that it doesn't get twisted or taken like, oh, we believe the same thing. We believe in Jesus too, but it's not quite the same. And so, making sure that we are sharing the true gospel and keeping it, saying, hey, this is what the Bible says, and this is from the Bible. And in Belize, it's sort of a similar problem, where there's so much syncretism with other religious entities and just different things that they have going on, different parts of the culture, that it's definitely a challenge there. But
so that I could see that being maybe trickier. I mean, it would be a challenge in either place, but I'm thinking a language barrier would exist in the Dominican as well, because for missionaries coming in who Spanish isn't their first language, even if they're trying to articulate faithfully, that one-to-one doesn't happen in language translation. It just doesn't work. So that would make it harder to make sure that what you're speaking is what they're actually hearing. And vice versa, as they speak to you, it would be easy to just kind of nod along and say, yeah, that's what I meant.
Absolutely.
It might
Yeah,
not be
we have a really awesome language program that all of our new missionaries go through for that exact purpose. And especially pastors are usually paired with a pastor who is either a native Spanish speaker or has been speaking long enough that, they kind of know the in and outs and all of those things to kind of help avoid that problem and make sure we have that going on.
I've heard of that, especially for pastors and preaching, when it comes to, for example, the deaf, and so sign language, and how the language just works differently than a spoken language. And yeah, it sounds challenging to say the least. So, okay. But it's nice to hear that people are actually open to speaking about religion, because the American culture, largely they're not, or at least we've been told that they're not, right? The two things you don't talk about at the dinner table are religion and politics. That's what we've been told. And that's not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things I was so surprised, going on visits. They kind of just walk through the streets, and they have a plan, we're going to go to this house and this house, but the people see you walking and they will stop you, on your way to somebody's house and go in and give you food or whatever, and you just kind of talk, and then always ask, well, can we, share some scripture in a short devotion in your home? And everybody always says yes. And they're like, oh, yes, please do. Like, absolutely, we'd love to talk about it. And that was something that I was really surprised, because I was nervous. I was like, oh, man, how are we going to bring this up, right? The awkward conversation of, like, do you know Jesus? But it's definitely different. It's not like that at all.
That's good. I know here it feels like we're almost baiting our neighbor into starting the conversation for us. So, wear a cross or wear a crucifix, carry your Bible with you, have something that they might look at and say, hey, what's that? And that opens the door for that conversation. A couple of years ago, I made a pectoral, not a pectoral cross, but a necklace that's an empty tomb. And so I've worn that around when I've done like hospital visits or things. So I've multiple times been in a hospital elevator and a person's looking at me and they're like, what is that? Well, let me tell you about the hope I have in Jesus. But yeah, it's refreshing to hear of a place where not only can you just bring it up on your own, but it's actually welcome to do so. That's great. Thanks be to God.
Absolutely.
So the next question on the list was the idea of churches, like buildings. As in different periods of history, Christians have not always had buildings to worship in. What's that like in the mission field where you're at?
So here in Santiago, we have 3 churches and a church plant. And all 4 of them currently have a building. One of the challenges of starting a church from scratch is that we don't have churches and we don't have church buildings, and sometimes they're hard to get. So, one of the spaces that our churches are in right now that we've been renting for at least 6 years, I believe, used to be a disco hall, and somebody was either murdered or died in it, and so nobody would use the building. So we got it for super cheap and converted it into a church and blessed it and all of those things. But ideally, we don't stay in that space. It is a rented space, and we are able to buy a church that is a dedicated church building and not an old disco. But that actually provides some really unique other ways to do mission. But we are very blessed to have the buildings that we have here. In Belize, our churches have buildings, but they tend to experience hurricanes and flooding and are not as resistant to that. So a lot of the work that is being done there is, fixing up our church buildings and making sure that they are safe and functional in the spaces to serve the people.
Okay, so in that regard, thinking of hurricane damage or flood damage, what are the churches in Belize typically constructed of? Would they look anything like the church that we would think of back home?
No. Yes, on the inside a bit, altar, pulpit, all of those things, crucifixes. But I think it's one of the most picturesque churches we have in Belize is on stilts. And it's made of wood, and it's a beautiful building, but, probably wouldn't be the first thing we think of as, we see that and we think that's a church. So they do definitely look different, but obviously purpose is the same. They all have a baptismal font, the back, and all those things.
There's a beauty to having that kind of symbolism in the space, right? So you're able to mention things that we all can relate to. You said the altar and the pulpit, right? So the altar is the reminder of God being present with us, his sacrifice, Christ's sacrifice on the cross. We are nourished and fed from that altar as we think of the Lord's Supper. Just all those beautiful connections that we can make, and being able to just walk in and recognize it. But at the same time, it's changed. It's varied in place to place. As you've described the outside of a building, it's hard for me to picture even a building on stilts. I've seen a picture or two before, but versus, Europe and the giant cathedrals that are there. Listener, by the way, there's a cathedral on sale in St. Louis. I just heard about a month or two ago. So if you're looking for a church, beautiful architecture. So we rejoice to have the place to worship the Lord. This is good. All right, so what's at stake? Seeking to share Christ with your neighbor where you serve.
Yeah, there's always a risk of somebody not being open to it. I believe only one time I've been on a visit and they were like, "Oh, can we share devotion in your home?" And the people were like, "Nope." I was like, "Okay, God loves you. Have a nice day." All the times I've been on visits, which has been numerous, that's been the only time. So that's always, it's kind of a really rejected feeling. But brushing yourself off and going into the next home and praying that they are more receptive is always a challenge on the mission field. Another thing that we tend to experience being the white people in Latin America is that they don't necessarily take us seriously or think that the church is legit. Kind of like you mentioned, we want to make sure that they know we're not here to take your money, and we're not here to give you money, but we're here, we're telling you about Jesus so that you will come to church, and you don't have to come to church, but, we want you to be able to grow in your faith, and that's what we're really here for, and, spreading that gospel. And for the people here, like you were saying, this is a first-generation Lutheran area. The people here are not going to have grandparents or parents or, a family of Lutherans. And so it's always a challenge. We want to make sure that when they become Lutherans and they, start coming to churches and become interested, that they have the support that they need in that aspect to do that.
Well, thanks be to God again for a new start in that sense of first-generational work that is being done in that place. And so Dominican and Belize, those places, plural. Mm-hmm. But also thanks be to God for what you were saying about the receptivity. Like 1 out of who knows how many visits, that's it? That's a tremendous percentage.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it would be inverted in the United States, the old door-to-door method of evangelism and just taking a shot at it. So thanks be to God for those opportunities for you all to share Christ there.
Absolutely.
All right. How can Christians here in the U.S. or other parts of the world as well, but how can we encourage you? How can we support you, both in your faith and in your work?
That's a great question. Pray for us, please. We appreciate it, all of your missionaries and all of the people serving here, and pray for the people that we're serving as well. That the Holy Spirit can work in them and bring them in. Every missionary has newsletters as well. So if you're interested in, maybe you know somebody who's a missionary, or you're interested in a specific mission field, whether it be the Dominican Republic or, Spain or Germany or, wherever, all of our missionaries who serve talk about the work that they do and put that out there. So if you're interested, we'd absolutely love to have you kind of learn about that. We're sent by the LCMS, so the work that we do is also the work that all of you guys in LCMS congregations are a part of, whether you know it or not. So your prayers and your support are a huge part of keeping us on the field. And of course, if you're interested in serving, we'd love to have you come down on either a short-term team or on a longer career service if you're interested. And yeah, absolutely. We are so encouraged by, when people come down or when people talk to us, we are so encouraged to be here and to continue.
So a couple follow-up questions on what you were saying. First, on the newsletter thing, will you be writing a newsletter then?
I do. I have a newsletter that comes out every month, usually send it out by email. You can go on the LCMS website. If you either search missionaries, you can search my name if you're looking for mine specifically, or another missionary's name. Or if you're looking for a regional one, you can find that on the mission part as well and sign up for our newsletters. Mine comes out once a month. It's usually about 2 pages, a lot of pictures.
All right. And so I will see if I can find that link and put it in the show notes for this episode as you are listening in for this one. But then another question would be, as you were trying to plug and encourage people to consider a longer period of career mission work, you're joining a team down in Belize of 4 pastors and their families, as you said earlier. Are there any other people on the team, or is the team looking for any other people?
Absolutely. We are always looking for more people to be missionaries. They're getting me soon, probably within the next couple months. And then we're also I believe she's a DCE intern who's going to go down and work there. We have a school and a preschool that's attached to one of our churches, and, starting to get Sunday school programs and things like that really going in those churches and those programs. So she's going to be helping us with that. But we are always looking on the mission field for pastors, deaconesses, teachers, music teachers, and lay people to come serve. So you don't have to have a specific skill to be a missionary. You just have to love Jesus and be willing to go wherever God sends you. I didn't go to college for mission work. I always like to tell people I have no missionary skills whatsoever. I did not speak Spanish at all before they sent me here. But if you have, any soft skills, if you have any skill really, they can find a position where you can help out on the mission field.
This is a good reminder for the audience what school is for, right? We are educated so that we have skills to serve our neighbor with. It's not that one's better than another, right? We have lots of skills, lots of vocations, lots of ways we can serve each other, and these are good things. So on the mission field, just as much as in your own current neighborhood, there are ways to use those skills and interests the Lord has given to you to love and serve others. And that's a good segue into what was my last question that I shared with you before we met, which is, what additional encouragement would you give Christians here in the United States as they serve as missionaries of Jesus where they are?
Absolutely. It feels really challenging. It can definitely, and like we talked about, it's scary to go out and say, hey, to start that conversation of do you know, how's your relationship with Jesus, or things like that. But don't be discouraged. Even if, you go talk to 10 people and only one of them wants to talk about Jesus, or you go talk to 100 people and only one of them ends up coming to church, that is still one more voice in heaven, up in the choir. So definitely don't be discouraged. Keep going. It's really awesome work, and it's part of our role as Christians to, make disciples of all nations and bring people to Jesus.
Thank you for those words of encouragement for us as we think of serving our neighbor again where we are. Jesus says the road is narrow and that those who enter are few. And so it's easy, I think, for us to try once or twice and to get discouraged. So that was a beautiful encouragement and a reminder to us to just keep going, just keep trying. Because as you said, even one, if you try this 1,000 times and it only works once, it was worth it. It was worth every bit of it. Even if persecution is the response, and this is again what so many of our brothers and sisters in Christ have seen over the centuries. Stephen was glad to welcome Paul into paradise. It's such a fascinating thing to stop and think about for just a moment, as you think of Acts and what happened. But he's glad to see him. They're brothers in Christ.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, any other things that you'd like to share with us? I ran out of questions.
Thanks for having me on, and we'd love to have you guys come down sometime, listeners as well, or just reach out and say, hey, interested in what you're doing. We appreciate it.
Well, and thank you as well. Glad to have you on the show today, and the opportunity to learn about those parts of the world, the work that the Lord is going to be doing through you in those places. So it's a gift, and thank you for it.
Thank you.
Should the world afflict us, struck down but not destroyed, we know that God will raise us, who raised Christ from the dead. We speak while we are living to glorify Christ our King. Christ pledges to the faithful, He'll give the crown